welcome. We're here at the Missouri University of Science and Technology Electrical and Computer Engineering Department. I'm here with Dr. Steve Watkins and Dr. Ryan Bales. So the 2018 HKN President, the 2024 HKN President, and I'm Sean Bentley, the 2025 HKN President. And so we're here to talk a little bit about how Rolla has played a role in the history of Eta Kappa Nu, as well as how it's tied in over this 15 years with the merger with IEEE, as well as a little bit about the Gamma Theta Chapter that resides here. So thank you both for joining me. And
good to be here. Yeah.
So we are all members of Gamma Theta, having all gone through the department here over many various years. And in fact, Professor Watkins was the advisor during both of our times here.
And like you mentioned, I was elected as a Gamma Theta when I was a student here, so I had that involvement, so I had a connection to the chapter. Even back then, I was the bridge correspondent in my year.
Who was the chapter advisor when you were adopted?
We had several. We had Jerome Knopf as advisor part of the time. Paul Stegall was part of the time. So again, it was rotating. Still, there was always the faculty support there. And I'll have this in my notes to mention later too. But the faculty always showed up. It wasn't just come to me when you have a form to sign. It was okay. I'm at the meeting. Even if they didn't say anything, they showed an interest. And I think that the students noticed that.
And even then, you had more than one advisor to the faculty.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
When anyone who went to the 2024 SLC, they saw the activity we did with signing the plaques, and that's something we did, as inductees. And yeah, so you take it around, and pretty much every faculty was very happy to sign. I've still got mine on my desk to this day with just names covering it. So
a few would ask questions in exchange for their signature. You had to recall the charge on an electron or something.
Well, when I was HKN president, I went back and started looking at some of the signatures on my plaque, and it was really interesting just to see, the people, that this was part of my introduction to them, because I had a signature from Bob Benton, who was the prior chair, and of course was going to be president of HKN and executive director. He was on there. I had the department chair, who doesn't have to go with the Amman Honor Society. She signed my plaque. I ended up getting a signature of a charter member. He was on the faculty at that time, Charlie McDowell. I had a signature from the person who would become my master's advisor, as well as a signature from Paul Stegall, who was interim department chair when I was kind of in between things and got to give me my first teaching opportunity. So it's really kind of interesting seeing that HKN was kind of wrapped up in all those relationships. And I think it really shows that you're really forming a network, and it's a way of introducing yourself to others, and again, having that network, whether it's with other students or with faculty or mentors, things like that.
I mean, the role that I'm in now at GTRI, my entire career at GTRI, started off really on that trajectory as a result of my running into you one night, asking about master's project topics when I was a senior, and you stuck out in particular because of my involvement in Eta Kappa Nu early on.
So I just want to start out, and I guess I'll kind of throw this question out to you first, is obviously there's been a long history of both the university and the chapter within Eta Kappa Nu, and so how has that kind of evolved over time? How did it kind of come to be that Rolla was a primary focus within the history, and how did that evolve, and how has that kind of changed over the last, few decades here?
Okay, I'm happy to talk about that. I enjoy talking about our chapter history as well as our university and department history. Our department's actually last year celebrated its 100th anniversary, so we got to start in 1924, and about that time period we added the IEEE student branch, and just a few faculty at that time, and it really started growing after World War II. And at that point they decided they wanted to have an HKN chapter. So they had to go through a fairly involved procedure at that time. At that time, we had to have an organization that would prepare a petition. So they worked on getting the Theta Nu Honor Society started here, and then they did the petition, and then about a year and a half after they got approved. So we actually were chartered in 1952. And we were the 55th chapter of Eta Kappa Nu, so we were still fairly early. I know we have 260 something now.
280. Yeah.
280 now. Okay, I'm behind the times there. So we were in that fairly early group there. And it started off as something that the faculty here wanted it to be a professional development opportunity for the students. And we had some faculty that really put their heart and soul in it. Gabriel Skitek in particular, he actually became a professional member at our charter ceremony, and he was one of the early advisors. It rotated around a little bit, but I think he was always in the background, making sure that things were happening. They were very serious about it. You see some of the photos from that time period and the inductions and so forth. That they tried to make it very formal, very active. It appears to be one of the more active chapters of anything on campus at that time. They actually won some outstanding chapter awards fairly soon on, and after they chartered here. So the faculty was very interested again in professional development and networking. Skitek in particular was very involved in it, but the others, they rotated around, and so a lot of the faculty were serving as advisor and so forth. So they were very invested in what went on. The department was very invested over the years as well. They had a student office at one point, and then they made a student projects lab at another point, which is essentially our makerspace, as well as office and tutoring facility. So a lot of investment there from the department as it developed over time. We had chairs and faculty members that were involved above the chapter level. The chair, Roger Nolte, actually served on what was the board then for a time. And then Bob Benton, who was the chair a little bit later, he got involved in HKN very heavily, served on the board, and eventually became, the executive secretary for a while. We actually had the headquarters here, so we had a lot of involvement through the years. But the chapter was always very active with things and established a lot of traditions. Some of the activities adjusted as we went along. But I think probably the thing that has helped us out the most is I think there was always a sense that we want to make HKN forming a community in the department and really striving to do that. And I think because it wasn't just a recognition, but it was, okay, now you're part of a group that's not only serving the group's interests, but also the department and the overall student body interest.
Yeah, I remember there being a very high engagement ratio of the student members back when I was a student here 20 years ago. It wasn't just 3 or 4 students doing all the activities, organizing things. We had a lot.
And they became friends. They became study partners in addition to their direct activities with HKN. So I think that has really helped our success over the years.
And the department was always very supportive because I remember, we had our own room and they'd donate old lab equipment that we could use in there for the student activities and things.
So they tried to make it an institutional resource and support the students, and that helps a lot. I know it's very easy to, at the beginning chapter, here's a recognition program, and not go beyond that. And you get so much richness from the organization if you go beyond that.
Yeah, that's something we try to encourage in new chapters that are forming too, or that they're talking about it. We talk a lot about the benefit that the chapter can bring to the department and vice versa. All the most successful chapters have a really strong backing from the department, and they're also contributing a lot to the department through lab tours and
it really grew too from that. I look back at some of the charter members of the chapter when they were students that really kept involvement with the department through the years. In fact, one of our earliest study rooms from Emerson Electric was sponsored due to the efforts of a charter member of the chapter. So they were giving back, and I think it goes back to that sense of community, I think.
So all 3 of us were inducted pre-IEEE-HKN merger. And so definitely there's been a lot of changes. So, and this goes out to everybody here, but what do you think are some of the benefits to HKN, first off, from the merger? How is it different for students or chapters or members now than it was before?
One thing that comes to my mind is that ADCAP knew as a student-centered, student-focused organization for so long. I'm not sure how much professional involvement we had after folks would graduate. I certainly didn't really think about it too much after I graduated. I didn't know that much about what roles were available or what people needed help with. And so I think one of the things we gained from being involved in IEEE is more, they're student focused, but they also appeal to a wide professional member range through technical conferences, all the things they offer there. It's more common for people to think about being involved in IEEE as professionals. And so I think we were able to tap into a big resource there, professionals that are also used to being involved and volunteering their time, the same spirit that we appreciate and respect within HKN.
I think related to that, but also I think there's been an expansion of above the chapter level activities. I think the SLC, the Student Leadership Conference, is a prime example of that, because I know when we two went through, there wasn't a whole lot besides what we did here at the chapter that you could be involved in as a student. So having some of those things like the virtual conferences that we have now, the Student Leadership Conference, which started a little bit before the merger, but really started becoming an annual event, and I think it's been more highly emphasized since the merger, has been a real helpful thing in getting students engaged and really, oh, this is exciting. I get to meet leaders, I get to meet other students from other institutions, I get to visit another campus, all these sorts of things I think have really added something to the student experience.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed is that somewhat domestically, but especially internationally, is name recognition, because a lot of places aren't familiar with honor societies and may not know what HKN is, but IEEE is pretty widely known in the EC world. And so when you're trying to make headway and maybe create a new chapter, get people interested in being a member, then they're like, okay, well, I know what IEEE is, and now what is this? And so at least it gives you that introduction to it, a conversation. So, and with student branches versus chapters, one thing I've noticed, so here, at least when I was a student, I was active in both, and both were very active, but they acted very independently. And with a lot of places that seem to have formed chapters after the merger, often it seems to be more interconnected. Has it really changed here much since the merger as far as how the chapter, the IEEE student branch versus the HKN chapter interact, or?
We still try to keep it fairly independent, but again, people are involved in both, and we share an office space, those sorts of things, and we sometimes co-host activities. But I know as advisor, I've always kind of emphasized that with HKN, our particular emphasis is on the leadership and the service aspects, where the IEEE student branch tends to focus a little bit more on the technical skills, the industry contacts, things like that. And of course, it's a little fuzzy in between those in terms of our activities. But by having them focused differently, I think that's really kept it a situation where you can have a strong student branch as well as a strong HKN chapter that have different roles.
Yeah. And so I guess the kind of continuation of that question, because certainly for me, I've always felt more of an affinity to HKN personally. In fact, because of my career direction, I actually was in other professional societies, not IEEE, for quite a while. But so certainly there's things that HKN brings to the IEEE table as well. And what do you all think that is kind of some of the biggest things that IEEE benefits from because of having HKN now as part of the family?
Well, I think a lot of it is, again, this idea of community. I think, at least in my experience, there's always been a strong sense of community among the HKN members than perhaps a student branch in general. I mean, there's some exceptions to that. And I think the opportunities for service, because most of the student branches I know, they might do some service, but that's not a principal thing, where HKN is really engaged with this idea of we want to serve others, we want to, whether it's others in the student body or the institution or the community, there's that real emphasis there.
That's one thing that really stood out to me while I was a student here. That the student branch did great things. They brought in a lot of technical talks. You got to meet people from a lot of different companies. But that was really the core of what they did. There wasn't as much, there wasn't other activity that you could really participate in as a member unless you were on the committee that helped organize those talks. Whereas HKN, we did so many different service activities and outreach, and the Boy Scout Electronics Merit Badge was one of my favorites to help out with. And so those were things that really let you, sink your teeth into the mission of the organization and kept people coming back to do more.
Yeah. And I think even since we've had the merger, I think the HKN members, and because of their engagement in HKN and through that also IEEE, I think have maintained a little closer connection to IEEE in general, but as well as HKN, than perhaps your average HKN student branch student that gets in their career and they're not thinking about the professional stuff later.
And both of what you said, because I know that was it over 100,000 hours of service by HKN chapters last year, and then also as far as drop off of membership, because IEEE is always looking at those numbers about how many student members stay members after, and I don't know the exact statistics, but it's been shown that significantly more, I think, of the HKN members of IEEE that stay IEEE members after than non-HKN.
And that benefits both IEEE and HKN.
That's a major contribution, because I know for the last several years, technical societies and sections have really been pushing to understand how they can recruit more students and keep them involved after they graduate, those sorts of things. A lot of students see the IEEE student branch as its own organization, and they don't necessarily see the connection to the larger professional community. And being involved in HKN can help bridge that gap and keep them involved.
That's it. And so I guess one thing then is, so over the 15 years, and I do think it's good for HKN to still have some sense of being its own organization, but certainly there are, places where IEEE and HKN both can work together. Are there any particular places where you think that going forward, maybe they could look at more interaction or better ways for each to serve one another and make them both stronger?
If you want to go first, I have.
Oh, sure. Now pass it on. I think kind of going back to something we hinted at before earlier, that how since the merger, the two organizations have how a lot has changed since HKN and IEEE merged. But I think there's still a lot of things about HKN that have remained consistent, especially among the older chapters. Some of the newer chapters that have just been adopted, post-merger, that they can approach things a little bit differently. But a lot of the older chapters, I think, still have the same strong traditions, same activities and events. And that didn't really change just because of the administrative change of the merger. So I think from that perspective, there's still a lot of independence between the core values of HKN, and those aren't necessarily affected by the hierarchy.
And I think the aspect that HKN, the importance it gives to just integrity and ethics and things like that, is particularly strong, and I think that's good for everybody to have a group that's kind of focusing on some of those thoughts as well. I think in going into the future, areas that we can even do more is perhaps connecting our HKN chapters more to regions and section activity. I think that's an area that could benefit everyone.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was thinking about, because I know, like, for example, when I've gone to some of the regional student meetings, there hasn't necessarily always been a place for HKN. And I think it'd be nice, we try to do this more and more with the professional regional meetings, but I think reaching the students where we really are the most hasn't happened as much as I think we could, and that's something I think we could really look towards going forward.
One thing I thought would be a nice place to perhaps start is, maybe sections or regions would maybe promote an award for branch and chapter interaction, and who does the best cooperative activities, something like that. That could just be an example of how you might incorporate it, still maintaining the distinctiveness, but yet giving them a role or a reason maybe to go to a region meeting or a section meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be more powerful at the region level, since at the section level, a lot of sections only have one chapter.
The last question I want to ask is about more specifically to the Gamma Theta chapter. And you alluded to some of this earlier when you're talking about the history and so forth, but there's a lot of sustainability and longevity. Now, there's some things that are just very much Gamma Theta, but at the same time, there is a little bit of what you might call the secret sauce or whatever. Part of that being the advisor, right? But how do you what sort of things are transferable? Because they can't transfer you. We're not gonna let them take you. But as far as like what sort of lessons can be learned from what Gamma Theta does, as far as like that, I know some people probably think the way things are, that you've been an advisor for a long time, you're very, very hands-on. I never actually got that feeling, and I don't. I think the way I always felt like what you really kind of did was help to find potential officers that would help kind of lead the organization, so that because the idea the advisor is advising right now, and but that's a magical kind of skill almost, right? I think in some ways. And so how do you do that, and what is about that is transferable to other chapters? What sort of if you were going to give a crash course in how to do this, what would that look like?
I think showing up's a big part of it. I gave an example of that earlier. Even when I was a student, the advisors were there, because I think that says that, okay, I care about this enough that could come, and I'm here if you have a question. I'm not necessarily telling the students or the student leaders what to do, but I'm available, and this is important. I think that's a best practice. I think having multiple advisors is also a best practice, because as someone's career advances, you start getting other responsibilities, and if your sole service is doing this, you know, sometimes you have to grow beyond that. I know when I was interim chair for a while here, it's like, okay, I have lots of responsibilities. Maybe I'm not as available, so I need to rely on some of the other advisors for things.
And let us know that the chapter know that there are more faculty backing them up.
Exactly. So I think that can be a really useful thing. So then the load's not bad on anyone, and it also, I think, encourages advisors to stay with it for a while, because there's always a disruption when the advisor retires or leaves, and then someone else comes and they got to relearn things, and many times it may be a young faculty member. Encouraging advisors to stick around for a while, because then you kind of know what's happening and what needs to be done and things like this, so that you can maybe put in those bits of encouragement. Have you done this? You know, for my chapter, because we're always thinking about maintaining the tradition and maintaining our scrapbook and things like that, and I think that helps. You know, really give a connection from year to year. I want to say, have you taken pictures? So, so they have something to remember. And I know when we have alumni come back, it's a lot of fun when they go back and report in the scrapbook. They say, oh yeah, there I was involved in this. And then if you were just doing it today, right, early on, oh, 20 years ago, here you were at the conference, or here you were, you know, doing Jeopardy in our meeting or something.
I had no
like
idea
that.
back then.
So those are, I think, from an advisor's point of view, things that are nice to do and to maintain. I think another thing that helps out is that, and this started, I think, probably with Ski Tech with some of those early faculty members we had here, is just how seriously they took HKN, that it was a serious promise to uphold the values. It was an honor to be part of the society. You know, the inductions were always very, very formal. It's not something you just, oh yeah, we'll go to the induction and then
you don't just sign here and now you're
and it's not just the recognition, but there's other responsibilities. You have to do a few things besides get the GPA to get in. I think that all added to having a chapter that people felt is a valuable thing to be part of.
And that's something we see a pretty broad spectrum on among chapters. Some have a very elaborate induction process like we did, and others it's much more simplified. They don't have as much of a vested interest in the process. They don't feel like it's as significant an ordeal as it is.
Yeah, and it can be harder if you have a smaller chapter where you have the benefit of having a fairly large department, so that students get in and it's more than just 2 or 3 people doing things.
And back to your point about the advisor actually showing up and being present for it. There are a lot of things that as an advisor you can't pick up on if you're just getting an email summary of how the meetings went on the next day. To seeing the interaction between the officers and the members, kind of being part of that vibe is really good.
And getting back to your point, Sean, on me, I'm not micromanaging. I always try to have meetings with the president so I can answer his or her questions, and then let him or her do the executive committee themselves. So then they get to decide what they're doing. I'm just, okay, have you done this? This is what's coming next. This is what's different about this semester versus last semester. Have you taken the pictures? Stuff like that. And then they can run with it.
Yeah, that's training them in that leadership so that they can go on after being an officer.
And being able to plan events and even a formal induction. I mean, it's more substantial if it is formal, that they've actually had a role in putting that together and having something they're kind of proud of. And at least we have the tradition to do of, invite your parents, invite your girlfriend or boyfriend, invite family members to this. This is an opportunity for you to be engaged in the college experience. And I think that's added to it as well.
And thanks, because I think some advisors tend to go too far one way or the other, of being overly involved or not involved. We really think, oh, this should just be the students. And so, finding that balance, I think something you've done very well, and clearly it's shown its work. So we have, not only 3 presidents here, but 3 different decades, right? Of, maybe I shouldn't date us, but you can look this up, even if, right?
So, I think it's pretty obvious.
Well, so an 80s inductee, a 90s inductee, an aughts or whatever we call them, I'm inductee. And so, any overall kind of message or words of wisdom that you'd like to share with, our HKN audience?
I would say, to me, HKN has just been a really strong professional community. And that's been one of the things that I valued with it, and try to make sure that I help promote that here locally as well as above the chapter level activities.
I guess I would say, like so many things, you get out of it what you put into it. There are so many opportunities to really get involved. If I had just shown up for the induction and never really did anything else, I would have missed out on the last 2 decades of amazing opportunities, meeting fantastic people. It's hard to imagine how much differently my career trajectory would have gone if I'd missed out on all that.
I mean, clearly, not only do we appreciate the organization, but our chapter as well. I mean, we're here for the induction tonight. So, it's amazing. And, so 40 years, 30 years, 20 years on, right? It's just,
I've come up from Georgia. You've come up from New York.
Yeah.
No distance is too great.
Yeah, that's right. So I really appreciate you both taking time to do this. And hopefully everyone out there enjoyed it.